You are watching part 6 of Karega Bailey. Crave the Spotlight Media Marketing, experts in the spotlight. Join us now as Victor Irving Jenkins interviews Karega Bailey.
Now, in spite of all the other accomplishments that you've done such a great job of talking about me. I didn't know this show was about me, but I'm full of warm fuzzies right now.
You gotta be.
So talk to me about your musical career, yo. In fact, is there a poem that you could share with us?
Oh, it would be my absolute pleasure. How the music came to be. If you were to pass by my house in Sacramento on 29th Street, Torrance Avenue, you would hear the rhythms of roots and culture reggae music from the living room stereo. If you went 2 doors down, you would hear hip-hop coming out my brother's stereo.
Hip-hop?
Hip-hop. And it was these blends created my reality. I had an older brother who was just an avid music collector. He was a writer. I would hear him practicing his rhymes. And then you would hear the roots and the culture music. And in roots and culture, there's this rhythm, there's this hope, there's this tale of suffering, and this tale of enduring the struggle. These two sounds created my soundtrack. So I would begin to pick up my pen and jot a few things that I thought would be insightful. And up until this point, it was just mostly poetry. My senior year at Hampton University, I ran for the title of Mr. Hampton University, and I was dating at the time a young woman who was a classically trained pianist. She had been playing since she was 5. And for my talent for that competition, we collaborated for the very first time. She played a series of keys that just pulled you in. You could feel the intensity. You could feel the contrast. And I wrote a poem at the time. It was a reflection piece on what was taking place in General Louisiana with the Gen 6. And that was the beginning of my musical career. From the very moment we performed for that first time, I knew we were on to something special.
So you never had any aspirations, like when you were younger, I want to be a poet, I want to be a musician? It just kind of fell on you, like what you're describing?
Well, you got to remember, I grew up to the sounds of reggae and hip-hop, and I had an older brother who was an MC, he was a writer. And I watched him call on the radio stations, and I watched him rap, and so I would begin to do the same thing. And so I executed rhyme to a T. In high school, I was known to be in a recording group, and I rapped, and a local label offered me a deal, but it did not match to what I knew I could accomplish and what would make my surrounding cast most proud. And I left and said, I've got to go get this education. I've been struggling for this thing for a long time. I knew I had to get that education. And there was a poet at the time named Black Ice. He was an HBO deaf poet. And him as a poet changed my tongue as an artist. At 17, I began to understand the injustices and the compromises in the recording industry. And I also realized that from my tongue did not necessarily come the best of who I was at times.
Well, what do you mean? What do you mean?
So, you take the masculinity, the bravado, what cool is defined as wherever you are at that time. And for me, cool at 17 meant that I would say things and perpetually suggest that I was engaging in things that I necessarily wasn't. Or that I may have been intentionally engaging in things that I should not have been, but I spoke on them as points of pride.
Is that what people in my generation call perpetrating?
You might call it perpetrating. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. That is precisely it.
Perpetrating, okay.
I prayed a prayer. I prayed that God changed my tongue. But I did not want to lose my gift. Changed my tongue, but I did not want to lose my gift. All through college, I was only a poet. Only a poet. I knew that I was still writing, and but it wasn't for public presentation yet. My girlfriend at the time, my wife now, Felicia, when we were at Hamp University, a music major she was, she played these keys and it was just so powerful. And I recited my first poem, Back to the Sound of Rhythm. And I knew we were on our way somewhere. However, from the time I stopped rapping, my senior year in high school, to my second year on the job as a teacher in DC, I made my first song. It was called Roses. Roses was written to show that I entered in the spectrum of reaching the black male, but I had so many hurt young black women in my presence, in my care. I had to respond. Mm-hmm. What made this particular song so beautiful was that my wife co-produced the song. It was her and my best friend who you've met, Jonathan Hendry. He was there with us with the 100. And I was at work one day, and I would always try to come home, and Jonathan had a studio in our house this time. And I would try to go in there and record, and the two of them had met up earlier and said they would produce a record for me. Roses was the beginning of this never-ending...
In my research as a sociologist, I study the role of collective efficacy, primarily as it pertained to the black male. And it wasn't until I submerged myself within the classroom that I seen that beyond the black male there is another struggling individual, and that is the black female. See, in my observation, she's like a rose, delicate yet beautiful. And we understand that it takes a considerable amount of effort to raise a rose to its fullest beauty. But I'm convinced you and me can get the job done. Together, we can water the garden and raise her.